Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. I realized two things the other day. One, this is the very first time in the history of the show I don't have a backlog of episodes. So that's cool. And two, there was one show just the other day where I forgot to welcome you guys, so maybe I should welcome you twice. So, I'm having dinner with a friend, and we're talking about, just all of the reactions from Americans that we experience. It used to be, you would only experience the reactions of people in your local neighborhood. And because of social media, you get it all over the place. Oh, wait, I got a new tattoo today. Check this out. I got, that's my hairband. I don't know if you can see that. That's Mr. Sid Mead's signature. We wanted to get that for years, and I thought if I got it before he passed, he might think that's a little strange because he didn't have any tattoos. So I waited till afterwards. But now he has finally signed his last work. But I was talking about the episode of, intellectual hatred. And my friend was like, well, you know what it is? She said, all these kids, they're just so coddled in this country today that they have no perception of anything. And she said, very specifically, we're going to embed a little bit of the Iranian situation in here. There's not an hour's worth of that stuff unless I really just wander around or recall history or something like that, which has its value, and maybe I'll do that episode at a different time. I just feel like there's much better sources on that. You go to Red Pill page, the dude's just kidding, For current news, the guy's really great. I don't agree with everything. He believes in, he seems like he believes in the Project Looking Glass being some futuristic technology, or at least he knows how to get good subscriptions by egging that on, and I celebrate him 100%. If you do go over to his channel from this channel, comment that this channel sent you over. That always helps bring some folks back this way. My friend, she said, the reason why kids would buy that this general dude that they killed is a martyr, is a good guy, which is all the leftist press in the world is just trying to pump this guy up. He was like literally Captain Kangaroo, man, passing out candy at a parade, man. And there's some kind of vacillating ones in the middle. They think that they're just so ignorant to think that Trump's going to be like, yeah, World War III. And by the way, there wouldn't be any World War III because I guarantee you ain't China or Russia going to throw down for that country, and ain't no one in that area like Iran leadership, right? The Iranian people are, I think, just as cool as anybody in the world. Is from everything that I've seen, they're fighting every single day, and that general dude killed, 2,600 of them just recently in the last month? So this guy's a barbarian. But the reason why some, capri pants wearing, latte kid, soy boy, can sit and blog at his favorite, Starbucks, is because that kid has never ever in his or her life ever lived in a world where that kind of shit's going on. That general dude was a boogeyman so bad that I heard a report, one of the citizens said, look, when I was a kid, they used to say that guy would come and get me if I didn't behave. I was like, whoa, could you imagine? There's someone in your government that you're so afraid of, he's a boogeyman as a child. Damn. How many little kids who heard that line to, the next day slept the first night of sleep in their life? So the other reason I want to make this episode is that I do come from an American perspective, and I'm very upfront about it. I want to thank you guys. I can't even tell you how much I love comments that say, I'm coming to you from Ireland. I'm coming to you from some other country, the UK, Germany, wherever you're coming from, and you contribute your personal perspective of your area, because that's what I don't have, is I don't have a really deep-rooted, especially from someone who's maybe 30 or above, and I don't mean to discount anyone who's younger, because some of you folks are geniuses too, so you're probably in that camp as well, but especially the older that you are, you've got decades of feeling and experience, one about your own country, but then again, sort of the overall feeling towards America. And that's literally the cream on the top for a guy like me to hear that sort of thing. So if you're in a foreign country and you bless me with your time, find a reason to comment on one of these videos. This should be a pretty good video to give me some perspective from your area. But I do get folks, rarely, but and it's a just criticism. And I don't even care if you're not right about things that you're assuming that we're thinking. If you think it, perception's everything. I used to tell people that, it's like, it doesn't matter if you think you're being nice and everybody disagrees with you. They disagree. Whatever you're doing is obviously rubbing them the wrong way. And maybe you don't give a crap because you think they need to grow up, or maybe you're trying to make alliances and you just can't get it to work, But I thought that, what I'm not talking about are Constitution honoring Americans. I'm talking about the other group, the group that falls for everything George Soros funds, falls for all these, racist Democrats who created this fantasy moment in the 70s. I'm going to say that a lot this season because it's something I need you all to remember and repeat. No event in the Democratic Party history happened in the 70s where they changed. They woke up one day and they bought $10 million worth of press and said, look, we realized we got it wrong, blah, 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 blah. No. What they figured out was their party was disappearing, and they had angered so many people on all sides of the fence, man. Remember, Martin Luther King used to march on D.C. He was surrounded by every race. Plenty of white people right there going, this needs to end. And they were all Republicans. All of them. And so they realized, all they care about is keeping their evil regime going, their globalist, regime going. And this country wasn't founded with the Democratic Party. That happened in the 1800s, the early 1800s. This party created itself, I believe, in the same decade. I think it was the 1830s. I hope I have that right. At the same time the Skull and Bones came into this country. The same time that, Andrew Jackson, the President Andrew Jackson, was fighting the bankers. This was all a cabal from the very, very beginning. Super racist. Again, creators of the KKK. They fought slavery being abolished. I think there's 3 measures that were passed, and I think 2 out of 3, all Democrats voted against freeing the slaves, and the last one, 2%, managed to pull their head out of their butt. But then by 1959, they're still voting against desegregation. Okay, but this is about coddled Americans. So what do I mean by coddled? Well, there's all kinds of ways of approaching it, and I think every single decade, the amenities of the coddling of American sort of lost children changes and increases. It compounds from the previous decade. So you get to keep everything that you got in the, say, 90s, and then you get to keep everything in the 2000s, and then you get to keep everything in the teens. Now we're headed into the 2020s. Okay, who knows what's going to happen here? Hopefully this process ends very abruptly here in the next, say, 5 years or so. Let's just go at monetary things, which isn't... what's interesting about this, I'm going to give you a monetary view of how the amenities of these coddled children increased. And even though it seems a little off base from, say, something that's important, it isn't, because it is setting in place mechanisms in the mind. Remember, I had this, I have an episode called Technologies of the Mind, and what it's about is the globalists using technologies of the mind, belief systems, and indoctrination. Of course, there's MK Ultra to drive it straight into your cornea, right through your brain. But what I'm talking about with materialism will be relevant here soon. In the 70s, in America, it was just as basic as you could have it. You had a nice house, or you didn't. you had a nice car, or you didn't. Or maybe you had one and not the other. The home was usually, a family room, a kitchen, and you had your bedrooms. If you had a bigger house, you'd have a living room. One of my favorite houses we ever lived in, I guess the living room is kind of a joke in America. It's where you put the kitchen table that no one ever eats at. The room is usually kept immaculate, and no one's ever allowed to go in there and touch anything. It really was silly. But if you had a television, you only had one, usually. If you had a telephone, maybe you'd have one wired in a bedroom, but that was pretty rare in the 70s, in the Midwest at least. Maybe it wasn't so much on the coastal regions, because I wasn't living here at the time. But everything was like, if you had a game system, an Atari 2600 or an Intellivision or a ColecoVision or something, it sat in the front room, and it was for the entire family with that one TV. If you had a stereo, it was that one stereo. Maybe you had a radio in your bedroom, but that's about it. Households grew up with rules. And man, your ass was back inside the house at a certain time, especially when it was dark outside. Your mom would go out on the doorstep and yell your name. And you had about 120 seconds to get your ass in there. Otherwise, she's going to send your dad out to get you. And so we just behaved. When kids would approach adults in the 70s, you had respect, even if it wasn't your parent. And, out of an entire town of about 12,000 where I grew up, and I did move around a little bit, but, even the rattiest little kids still had respect for adults. And the reason why was that it was pretty easy to follow the kid home and tell the parent that they had done something wrong. And regardless if the parent was rich or poor, the poor wanted to, their attitude was sort of like this: I might be poor, but I'm not uncivilized, and my kids are not going to be uncivilized. They are going to respect you. And so it was just a really nice last decade of, I think, utter perfection in this country. Now, the 80s were pretty damn good too, which is really where the game consoles thing started. The 80s were interesting. It was sort of for me, my perspective's a little bit weird because it's where I went through my transition from my grade school into my middle school. So I was awkward as a kid, trying to find what the hell I'm going to look like and that sort of thing. I was also stuck in the Midwest. I was also very poor. I was poor in Massachusetts. I was poor in the Midwest. But when I finally got back to my hometown at about 13, at least I had my family around me. So it was a different perspective. But my little hometown, it was that thing I just told you times 10. You behave because our town is so tiny that you would be turned in instantaneously. It was so bad once I was walking home with my cousin, who's a guy I've since disowned. He's just a little bastard. I swear to God, he's just never ceased being an asshole. But he threw a rock at a church window inside of a door. And I'm just like this totally innocent kid. I mean, I was like ridiculously innocent. And I'm looking at this whole thing. He broke the window. And I'm standing there. He says he starts running because he knows how to be a criminal, right? He starts running. And I'm just standing there. And the preacher opens the door. And he's like, you come here a little bit. And I'm like, I didn't do it. He did it. That kid running down the sidewalk right there did it. But I don't know why my cousin was walking home with me because he didn't live in the area. I don't know what the deal was. Anyway, I got hauled in, taken down. He calls my mom. And then, he wanted my mom to pay for the window or whatever. I don't even know what happened to it. But I think she told him, look, it's not my kid. Trust me. My kid's like the straightest laced kid in the world. And you're not going to extort money out of me just because he was standing next to some douchebag. Whether she turned in my cousin or not, I don't know. But you behaved is what I'm trying to get at. But then we get to the 90s. And things changed at home. Well, one, personal computers started to explode. And pretty much by the late 80s, everyone, who wanted a computer in their home had one. And it wasn't uncommon for at least 2 rooms to have a computer. But they were really, really expensive. I mean, my first computer I bought in 89 was, I think, because my company always provided a computer for me. But the first one I ever bought, I think, was 91. and it was a 2VX Macintosh. It was $3,700. Like, geez, I wouldn't spend $3,700 today. But something else started occurring. Those game consoles started to appear in every single kid's bedroom. Maybe there was one out front, but every kid had one in their bedroom. So if you had 2 or 3 different brothers, just depends on their age brackets. There's usually 2 in the house because they can't, agree on what games to play. And most of them are single player in the first place. All right. Then kids will start getting computers. Each kid's getting a computer. Well, that starts upping the game in America where you're expected to have these things from your parents. I can't even imagine my dad buying me a computer. Like I said, when I got my first computer in the 80s that was my property, my buddy's dad won it from Radio Shack. It was a Coco 2 computer, ballpoint pen printer, a cassette player, and the cables to hook to a monitor. I think it's worth $500. But I think my dad's buddy had rebuilt his engine at our house, his station wagon engine, which I got to see, which was really cool. I think he just sold it to my dad for $50, just as a thank you. So that was my first computer, $50. But before the 90s was out, think about the difference between entering the 90s where Super Nintendo comes out, starts replacing a lot of PCs, but a lot of kids went double down on the PC side of things. And parents were supposed to be supporting their kids, because the kid's going to want a computer at least at 14, 15 years old. And, the cheapest PC at the time was at least $1,500. But most kids want the better video card, the better sound card. So these machines are hitting $2,500 easy. But they also want the console in their bedroom. And what do consoles require? Well, they require, depending on which one you had, a bunch of cartridges, which are $25, $30. By the time the decade was over, these things are $40. An average PC game was always $39. Okay. That's a huge improvement in the list of amenities of a kid in America. But about 96, 97, cell phones start to come in. You had your first analog flip phones, then you had some digital candy bars. I'm sure those things were just rotting our bodies. Some parents, would actually spend that on their kids, but not many. You have to understand, around 1998 in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, my Netcom email address cost me $45 a month. And that didn't guarantee me any connection to the internet. They didn't provide a modem service. I had to have a different modem service on top of that, which was like $70 or $80 a month. Okay, well, those amenities started going into the house, but it really didn't take off until the 2000s. So by the 2000s, by 2010, let's just say, now video games cost $70. Computers, well, you can get one for $1,200 up to $3,000, but the parents are always on the hook for this stuff. Mom, I deserve a phone that cost $700 at the time. I deserve a cell phone package. I deserve the game console. I deserve, 30 games that cost $70 a piece. The game console is now anywhere from $400 to $500 when it first comes out. This was all just standard operation. So the parents are now out thousands of dollars a year. And I mean thousands of dollars a year. Because the amenity pool in this country went up. Today, how crazy is it? Phones are now $900 to $2,500, depending on which ones you're buying. I doubt many parents buy the top end one, but you're always going to buy one that's about $1,000. Yeah, you can add a line onto your existing line for maybe $40. Computers, well, they're still extremely expensive. Maybe get your kid the $1,200 one. But you know what? If you're going to the store, your kid's going to whine and complain that they need the one that's $2,000. They got to carry it around. Now they have to have iPads too, or tablets. This is negating clothing, various bragging rights. We got to go on certain vacations so we can brag on Monday. And this is just, you don't love me if you don't get me these things. And this doesn't include birthdays and Christmas in this country. Birthdays and Christmas are a translation of how much does your parent really love you? Because if you don't get a bunch of stuff and you have to go to school and your friends say, well, what did you get? And you have to say nothing or some crappy stuff, well, then you're from that degenerate family and you should hang your head in shame. Now, meanwhile, let's go back to the 80s and let's run this again a little faster on a different metric. Okay, well, around 1980, and I heard Lionel Nation quote this completely wrong just recently, which shocked me. This is why staying in school is cool, man. And really, when you want to say you're awake, you just need to have a really good memory and then listen to everything you can get your hands on and then go do your research to make sure what you're listening to is true or false. But he brought up the fact that the Iranians in the 70s had detained, I can't remember exactly how many, over 100 of our folks for 444 days. A little over a year and a half, right? Or around a year and a half. Okay. So these, I remember this. The hostages were detained, held, and there was all kinds of, T-shirts that would say, fuck Iran, and, have like T-shirts. I think even Eddie from Iron Maiden had a piece of artwork like that, or someone drew something like that. But it was always, hate Iran, hate Iran. They weren't torturing our folks, I don't think. But it came time for the election, late 79, 80. And George Bush Sr. is on record flying to Iran. He's running for vice president. The inside scoop was that Iran was ready to let these hostages go. They were really tired of all the pressure and the world view on them for doing this. But George Bush Sr. flew over there and negotiated for them to be released just the second after Reagan got into office. And I think, as Lionel Nation said, the part he got correct was that within an hour, I believe, of Reagan taking office, we got the phone call and all these folks are coming home. So other than that, from 1980, once the Vietnam War ended by 1975, which oddly wasn't discussed much around me, which is really, really strange. It ended and we didn't, we had soldiers coming home, but there wasn't like any dinner table talk about, oh my God, did you hear about so-and-so? He's totally crazy now. Or did you hear about so-and-so? They came home safe. I don't remember anyone coming home, but I know that as I grew up in the 80s, I learned about the guys that came back from Vietnam. So there were tons of them. And they just didn't talk about it. It was really strange. So we went straight into disco fever and heavy rock and roll. We had Van Halen popping up in the late 70s. But by the 80s, you have from 1980, pretty much, I guess, until 89. But no, I guess all the way up to 90, because the Desert Storm thing happened just inside the next decade. The 80s had nothing. At no point was American lives threatened on a daily basis. When we woke up, yeah, we knew about the Cold War with the Russians, but that had all devolved down to us believing that every time they want to wipe their butt, they're standing in a line, it's a mile long just to get some toilet paper. And it's like that was heavily exaggerated because there were only a few places in Russia that actually had that problem. But they were suffering, tremendously because the regime was utterly bankrupt and they couldn't keep the place open. And we know that because it's not that way anymore. It's quite opposite nowadays. Moscow looks like, I don't know, it's an odyssey of money at this point. If you haven't watched a little documentary on Moscow in the last 2 years, do yourself a favor, watch one. Moscow looks like a gigantic Rodeo Drive now. It looks like Dubai. It has any one street probably has $10 million worth of cars parked on it at any point in time. It is nuts, right? It's very gangster, I think, still in the business sense, but not gangster in maybe the violent sense. So 1980, 1990, nothing, man. And what that afforded Americans at the time was that we were waiting for the American dream to trigger for all of us in our teens. This is where we got the yuppie craze in the 80s here in America. Yuppies were successful people BMWs were there. It was a 320i was the car of choice. And you know, California was loving it and digging it. And when I got out here, I was in the middle of just a mecca of success. Everything was successful when I got here in '87 with the Republican governor. The entertainment industry was utterly booming. The real estate market was booming. I got any industry you wanted to get into. I mean, everyone was happy. It was crazy how happy everybody was. I've said several times. And again, I'm going to mention this video. There's a video out there that says something about the 1980s, and it's a kid walking into a 7-Eleven with a video camera, because that was also an amenity that showed up for families. And this kid was just filming people in a 7-Eleven, and you just get the sense of how happy we were. I mean, it was like, and we think that's a defect today. I think that's what's really sad. You know, well, you're not hard. It's like, no, I don't know. Maybe today, but it wasn't back in those days. So what happens in the 90s? Well, we had a tiny distraction in the early 90s, which was Desert Storm, obviously as a result of Saddam Hussein invading Kuwait. But what we need to remember about that is that Saddam Hussein, one, was an asset of ours, okay? That's why Donald Rumsfeld goes over and shakes his hand and sells them chemical weapons, which then he uses on the Kurds, and we're completely immune from this liability. But he calls the State Department. He says, I want to invade Kuwait because it's land that was taken away from my country. And we're going to claim it because there's also a lot of oil reserves on it, and those are ours. The State Department told him, okay, go for it. So he invaded. Obviously, it was a very quick invasion. They immediately started tapping the oil wells. They immediately started taking over things. Now, we don't know what actually happened over there because we have caught so many, I guess you could call them early Gen 1 crisis actors going into the Senate and lying about torturing, which has now all been exposed, that we don't know if they did anything horrendous, you know? War does make people crazy, but usually it makes people crazy because someone's fighting back against you, and that starts to rot your mind, and then reaping and pillaging is sort of like synonymous with pulling a trigger. But when they're just sitting there going, oh my God, you're here, what? You know, I'm sure some of people fought back for a little while, but anyway, he rolls over that place. Then the Saudis call the State Department and say, what the hell did you just do? He says you gave him permission. You're like, yeah, well, it's not you. Like, yeah, well, that just bolstered his play in the Middle East, and you just gave him a ton of oil. That's our product, and so now we're going to be in some pricing battle with this guy. Get him out of there. Oh, okay. And who the hell knows what they did after that? They must have called the guy, okay, please leave, Kuwait. And he's like, what, are you kidding me? You gave me permission. This is a big operation. What do you mean, pull out? And of course, Bush Sr. Bombs the living crap out of him. And then we roll in there for the 48-hour invasion. We don't go to Baghdad. Why? Because he's one of our assets. He's safe. We have the highway of death, which is sort of the, see, Saudis, we really hurt him bad. See, Kuwait, we really hurt him bad. See this horrible highway, and I'm sure horrible things happen. I don't know, but it's Desert Storm. I remember I was at work, and it was really interesting with this Jewish guy who didn't look Jewish at all. It was really weird, but he said he's from Israel. Big guy. He's the guy that got his blood taken at a blood drive bus, and right when I was walking in with my girlfriend, he ended up going into convulsions because he was so malnutrition from eating cup of noodles every single day, washing it down with a Mountain Dew. Poor dude. He nearly died. He was gone for 3 weeks, and then he came back, and he had all that crap was out of his cube. He used to keep big pyramids of cup of noodle, and then the cans that he had already consumed. He was a grown man. Really strange. But he comes running in the room, and he's so thrilled to death that we're attacking Saddam Hussein. I just thought that was kind of weird. It was like overly jovial as opposed to, well, did you hear what's going on? Okay, all right, Desert Storm, all right. But after that, nothing. 1991 to 2000, we are living in a distraction called the internet birth with the HTTP protocol. So I'm in the Bay Area for most of that decade, for 9 years out of that decade. And I'm in the video game business for the most of that time. And I'm watching, I'm feeding these kids these games, right? In one way or another. Now, I'm self-employed for a majority of that time through being a contractor. And so, I only have the amenities that I can afford, which was pretty much everything I wanted. But seeing kids walk around with what I had when I was making tons of money, it was really shocking. It was like, it did take a while. But I mean, I would go over to my friends' houses and they had little brothers and stuff. And every kid had a SNES in their room, a Super Nintendo in their room. It was like, really? Is that inexpensive? And I don't remember what those things cost. But America did not grow up with threats over their heads of any invasion from anywhere, any bombs being dropped from anywhere. Then we cross over into this next decade, and we have kids very similar to the beginning of Vietnam. Now, what was it? Technically, I guess 63, 64, where these kids were coming out of the 40s, 50s, and the early 60s, and they're running into this jungle war. And they're shocked, you got 19-year-old kids that have never seen anything like that in their life. And all of a sudden it's like, here's a gun and you're going to find out what your dad did in World War II. Except there's no roads, that you're just in jungle 24/7. Some of my friends who are ex-Vietnam vets, they always get really pissed off when they see platoon movies and stuff where these kids are walking on roads. They're like, man, I was there for 3 years and we never stepped on one road. It was jungle, that interesting story, I heard was like, we would take a hill and we'd set up and we'd dig little holes and put our stuff in the little holes and whatever. And then we'd be run out of that the next week. And then, 2 months later, we'd take it back and they had, upgraded the holes. It was like everyone was sharing places in Vietnam. It's just an atrocious war, right? But of course, that day in September 11th happens, 2001. And all of a sudden, the party's over. The neocons had decided to create this inside job attack, which, again, we're still blaming other countries for that kind of thing. And it's like, are you kidding me, right? Ugh. You'll see my episode called That Day, if you want to see an episode on the day of September 1st, or September 11th, excuse me. But then, we now see something ultra horrific. Again, because most of us believed everything for at least the first couple years. I believed it all for 2.5 years until I saw Michael Rupert's video on 9/11, and then all of a sudden it started changing for me. Now, Michael's position was that that attack on that day was by the individuals that were claimed to be those individuals, but that it was all boiled in from the inside. Then later, of course, we all realized if anyone from outside this country helped, they were just doing some neocon a favor, But now you have a weird split in psychology. There are some kids, because they crashed the economy in 2002 to make sure that no one had a future. You had to go into the military if you were underprivileged, right? If you were literally at the wrong age to become an engineer in the 90s, and get yourself a job where you don't have to go and enlist. Let's say you're just turning 16, 17, 18 around 2001, and in a couple of years, they crash the economy, you come out, you got no money, your parents have no money, and you need to go somewhere, and so you join the military. It's all a setup, okay? But now you have parents of the kids that don't have to go because they're so young. They now feel burdened. No one ever talks about this. They feel burdened because society has turned dark. And again, like Nick Rockefeller told Aaron Rouzeau 11 months before 9/11, there's going to be an event, and it is going to catalyze a war that will last 100 years, is what he told him. Bad news, right? And again, we just shut this down with the latest president. So the parents feel like in order to distract their kids from a war-torn, terrorist-filled world at this point, right? The TSA shows up at the airports. As I've had it communicated to me, no airport in the United States of America has to accept the TSA. But they love the paycheck. When you go to Hawaii, It's different, man. You walk through door jams, you don't get all patted down. I mean, they have those people there, like they always did. If you look really suspect, yes, they do profile you because that's what they're hired to do. I mean, my God, you mean to tell me that a bank guard doesn't profile every person in his brain as soon as they walk through the front door? What if a guy comes in with a ski mask on and a bulge in his trench coat? Okay, well, if that bank guard looks at that guy as a liberal, blowhard, you're not allowed to stop him because you're being prejudiced against people in ski masks wanting to do withdrawals, and no, there's no exception with their methodology. Of course we profile people. Now, profiling is ridiculous in this country now, right? They will just take, I've got so many friends that are black, and they'll just say, look, man, I can't get through. I got friends who are brown. I mean, obviously, black people are brown too, but like they kind of could pass for Arab, but they're Mexican. And so they say, yeah, and they always pull me aside because I look Arab. Yeah, it's out of control right now. Totally out of control. But the parents started loading up the kids with distractions. And of course, marketing departments do a great job making sure that kids who can afford it always have it. And so again, it's the Jones Me thing. You go to school and all the kids are wearing that t-shirt or those pair of shoes or whatever, the jewelry, whatever. And now it's a cell phone. I always skip beepers because I forget they even existed. But yes, we had those beepers in the 90s. Beepers weren't that sexy to kids from what I remember. I had one, like everybody had one in their 20s, but you ended up paying for it. It wasn't like parents really felt like their kids needed beepers. But I remember that. Boy, those things just evaporated, didn't they? It's like they never existed. It's really funny. But what starts happening in the first decade of the 21st century, we get the first true social media. Right? We get Farcebook. And that's obviously a DARPA project that was transferred into that corporation through the In-Q-Tel dude, so DARPA could cancel their project. And now we have this, again, this fake straw man who's in charge, which is why they create movies about Facebook. They're trying to rewrite history away from what really occurred to create that company. They always do that. Benghazi. How many people saw the Benghazi movie? They tell you that the ambassador died inside the embassy of smoke inhalation. Well, go look at the video. They dragged the guy all around that town. They tortured him with cow prods, electrical cow prods. They just dragged his body behind, I think, a motorcycle or something. This guy died, as far as I could tell, a horrific death. And Hollywood dishonored his suffering by creating this bullshit movie that he just died peacefully in smoke inhalation, which is like suffocation. Horrid. But they do it to protect those that are responsible, which is basically Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. Because they were doing a Stinger missile swap out of that particular area to get all the guns over to ISIS, They make two movies about Steve Jobs and basically take a few moments in this guy's entire 57-year life or 56-year life and make entire movies out of just the most, infinitesimal, embarrassing moments of his entire life. Imagine that any of us had that happen to us, right? All of us have regretful moments. Okay, we've said things that are horrible. Or, like with Steve, it's really strange because you have, and this is almost right up the same alley of Coddled Americans, you have at least 12 guys that helped build the Macintosh computer. They were taught by Steve that you could accomplish way more than you ever thought you could, but you're going to have someone push you really hard. The guy, Steve, got in masseuses. He had a grand piano brought in, had someone play classical music to them. The guy was loading them up with tons of amenities, any food that they wanted, anything that they wanted, but he pushed them really hard. And there's at least two nerds, I don't even know who their names are, who have done little documentaries about Steve, and they just take a giant dump on Steve constantly. You know what's ironic about it? They get these interviews and make money off of Steve. One, they have the stock options. Okay. They make tons of money off the fact that Steve taught them how to do that, how to get more out of themselves, and they still, like a typical Bay Area fucking person, take a shit on Steve, as, you know, in spite of all the things that he gave them. There's not a single kind word from these couple guys. Most of them don't do that. Most of them enjoy their giant warehouse full of Ferraris. So we get social media. Social media starts to bleed back into society. Now, we've always had a piece of this in society, but it started to go to like a much more intense level, which is, you know, coffee shops have always been around. Coffee shops turned into diners, who turned into sort of like these Starbucks now that you can go and chill out and you got some Wi-Fi and that kind of thing. So that thing starts to explode at the same time, which is where we start getting blogging. The newspaper reporters and columnists go from print into these coffee shops and start, you know, waxing poetic from their laptop. Well, there's something interesting about that. It's sort of like a virtual reality. You have a home where all your stinky laundry is and where the bills are piling up, and then you have this coffee shop. You kind of walk in the door, and you create your own world. Who's bad? Who's good? And of course, you're getting tips and cues from people you respect, I guess. And you start creating your own little world online. A persona, an extra persona. You got your persona in the real world, and you got your persona online. Well, what did we have happen when the internet finally gained a grip on things? We had all these trolls show up. People that had no requirement, to identify who they were. And we still can do this today, of course. But it was really, really bad. I mean, there was, until like Facebook, I mean, you really could just be, you were expected not to be yourself. And then when Facebook said, oh, I can help you brag about your life, oh boy, you really wanted to be you and get it all in your face of your friends, right? But before the decade's over, we get a new president. We lose, you know, Bush Jr., who, again, I will go to my deathbed thinking that guy never wanted to be president for a day. I think he just wanted to chill out and do his thing, but it was to appease his dad on one level and, you know, probably doesn't mind being in the history books. He's far more intelligent than he behaves on TV. I do think he's got issues. You know, he used to be an alcoholic, used to be a coke addict. He's a massively rich kid. He's not ugly, so, you know, but in the end, he married a decent woman, and, you know, the Bush grandkids all have issues, unfortunately. I think everyone's calming down now, so it's cool. But we get this run for 2008. And at first, it was, as I understand it, the Bilderberg Group told Hillary Clinton in May, she's the pick. And so in an entitled methodology, she didn't run much. She didn't stomp much all throughout the summer of 2007. But Obama pounded the concrete, man. This dude was everywhere. And I can't remember I honestly can't remember who his first running. I don't know if that was the McCain-Palin thing. It always gets kind of sketchy. I think it's part of my dark history I try to block out. Anyway, by August, the Bilderberg Group told Obama, you're the pick. Hillary's out. Hillary gets pissed. They give her the State Department job. She wires her foundation directly to the State Department in a pay-for-play situation, and the rest is history. Secret email server, you know, tons of classified stuff going out. Due to WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, we know more of what happened today than ever before. But now we've got this weird situation where we see crimes, not in the sense of like September 11th, where, you know, physics was absolutely denied, right? Physics was denied to bring down the World Trade Centers. You know, we just had this crash of this Ukrainian airline in Tehran, right? Tehran, which they think it was accidentally shot down by their own people, thinking that it was a plane coming in to bomb the missile field, which was just after the airport. So here comes this plane right over, and they think someone just shot it out of the sky. Oddly enough, there was like, I don't know, almost 40% of the passengers were Canadian. Like, why are there so many Canadians in Tehran? It just blows my mind. But let's look at the rubble of Tehran when that plane hit the ground. It's all over the place. You got a tail fin, you got engines, you got plane parts, people parts, all this stuff. Big chunks of the fuselage. Well, you don't have any of that at the Pentagon. You don't have any of that. Honestly, you don't have it really at ground zero. You have an engine that a witness said was pushed out of the back of a white van. And then Shanksville, hilarious. Flight 93 is nowhere to be found. Recently, the farmer said that hole in the ground, I cut it a couple of years before this whole event occurred, but I was told to shut up. The coroner for 93 said, I never saw any blood samples, body parts, or anything, but I had to rule over how everybody died. Okay. So that was sort of like, really tough for us citizens to deal with in America, because we were like, can't you see this? Doesn't make any sense. I mean, just take high school physics and you're going to find out none of this is possible. But by the time the Democrats took over, now we're dealing with weird agenda things. Civil War kind of stuff, where it's like, hey, black person, all of your ailments are because of the white folk. Hey, white person, you should not populate because you have too much privilege. Hey, Mexicans, you should just own America. Your race didn't exist when Christopher Columbus came over here, but now that you've been created by mixing with Europeans like a lot of other folks in America, now it's just suddenly yours. Crazy, weird things. But our president, that we now know, Barack Obama, was a complete traitor. Complete and utter traitor. He was handing this whole country over to Europe. That was his goal, to hand it over to the EU. Just so you know, in October of 2016, is that right? Yeah. October 2016, Obama signed over the control of the American Internet to the International ICANN Foundation, ICANN. I am now getting emails from a European organization telling me what I have to do to legally own my domains, which is to keep all my information up to date. And it's pretty easy. I lived in the same place for 17 years. Pretty simple. But I got friends of mine that recently moved for various emergency reasons. And so their domain information is out of date. They're old, so they don't have all their login information. They don't even understand what the hell ICANN's talking about. And so all of a sudden now, normal people are in violation of European control. Oh, okay. We're now finding out John McCain, went over to the Middle East and helped found ISIS. There's reason to believe that he was actually also delivering, uranium samples from the uranium-1 cell that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton granted, which sold 24.9% of our uranium to a Canadian company, which was then bought by Putin. No one has any problem with that. So we have seen this whole thing get incubated up. And it is a very interesting thing. I'll tell you this much. So I'll give you a really bizarre analogy. There are receptors in the human body, all over the human body, that are designed to take various chemicals because that's what's supposed to go in that particular part of your body. Okay. So anything that comes and tries to go into the receptor that's not supposed to be there, it's not compatible physically, and so it bounces out and gets washed away by the immune system, or it finds its spot someplace else. So take that analogy and overlay it onto the United States citizens. These decades and decades of prepping the kids to constantly tell a child, well, you don't have a PlayStation in your bedroom? Well, you should really talk to your parents about that, because all kids deserve PlayStations in their bedrooms. And of course, all the kids are like, yeah, of course. A good parent goes, I don't know, maybe if you get all straight A's in school, there's only going to be one in the whole house. I don't necessarily want to play it, so you can keep it in your bedroom, but if you got brothers and sisters, that you're going to have to share, and you're going to have to work that out. If I hear any, arguing for any length of time, I'm going to take it and throw it in the trash or sell it to the kid next door, so you're going to be screwed. So you better learn how to, negotiate and get along. But these kids were groomed to be receptors for this agenda, to create all this dissonance, meaning descending against authority. By the time you got to the 90s, little kids would tell you to go fuck yourself. It was amazing. They feared nothing. And half of it's because when they go home, they're like, my parents don't even pay attention to me at all. So you're telling me that if you ring the doorbell and tell my parent that I've done something bad, that they're suddenly going to care? They're going to tell you to go fuck yourself too. Because that's who I'm being raised by. Why? Because the parents realized that the job opportunities started going away, the pay raises started going away, stock options that you might have at your company, well, they figured out how to screw you out of that. Remember when I first, a long time ago, I told you about all game companies that were ever successful in the 90s would offer profit sharing with their employees. I mean, every single one I know of. Little tiny ones, you own part of the company anyway, because that's just the way it worked. But Blizzard used to do it, Electronic Arts used to do it, Activision used to do it. You made a great game, you got a huge chunk of the profits. Now, they're making hundreds of millions and you're making maybe a few 100,000, but that's buy a whole house if you made one game really well. And people did. But by the mid-90s, even Electronic Arts they did a two-step process. It was like someone figured it out and then everybody did it. They said, okay, well, instead of having department-centric bonuses, meaning if your department did a good game and the other department didn't, you got a big check and they didn't. First step was to pool the whole company together. And what was very unfair about that is that, again, a lazy person will always be lazy if they think, well, that group over there's got all the good games, we don't need to work that hard, just push it out. It destroyed the integrity of the company itself until there were no bonuses. Oh, you had this 401k and you could always buy options all the time, but you never got them anymore for free. I mean, you get a little tiny bit maybe on a good year. But I was there at EA when we hit the first $1 billion. Nothing happened on my paycheck. Then I was there when we hit $3 billion. And, I got a bonus, but it's because I was so high up in the company, it was just standard bonus for my position, not because anything great happened in the company. It's part of your employment contract, right? So now we're sitting here in 2020. A super duper bad guy has been eliminated out of this world. And you know how it works. It's just exactly like, what is it? Charlie Chaplin said, he goes, as long as men die, liberty will prevail. And it's because, the guys who run the world do die at some point. Now, believe me, they're trying to conquer that problem too. But the fact that you have news organizations like CNN, the Communist News or News Network, having them bolster up this guy as being a hero blows me away. That you don't have the very next day or the very next minute or hour after that, all of the listeners going, what are you talking about? You apologize. That's ridiculous. We can go and count the guy's casualties. In fact, I saw some video, it was inside another video, where someone had basically said that they're trying to assess how many deaths this guy is related to / orchestrated, and they're still counting because there's so many claims against this dude. But I mean, it is a huge number. And it's Americans, it's Europeans, it's Kurds, it's all the different groups in the Middle East. It's bad. But now, what do we always talk about on the show? Because I just said it in the cancel culture episode, which is the kids who are protesting and trying to change the country. Now, the point of our First Amendment is to be able to dissent against your country against your country if you don't like what's going on. That's your privilege. That's what the First Amendment grants you, and we have the Second Amendment to protect the First in case anyone tries to take away that right. Okay, great. But we have a boatload of crazy Democrats who have a ton of followers, who don't know anything about anything. It's funny, like I said, you can interview a Democrat and, boy, they have so many opinions, but man, once you start asking the key players of the world, they don't know anything. And then they'll tell you to your face, I don't follow any of that stuff. Well, then shut the fuck up, would you? Because, no offense here, man, but you're trying to affect change on our country, trying to undermine our Constitution, but you don't even know what the fucking Constitution says, let alone all the agendas that are aimed at it and the individuals that you're supporting that are championing the destruction of the Constitution so that you lose the right to be who you are. The greatest facade, the greatest lie, and the greatest misunderstanding by those that feel like they're the chosen ones is that they're not the chosen ones. That's the hilarious inside joke that is created by this bizarre hubris of these kids, which is, you're not on the list. When they depopulate the world, you die. It's just that simple. You're not on the list. So stop defending the destruction of the world. If you think the world shouldn't have you in the world, where you can make a decision about whether you want to stay or not. But, it's kind of cowardly to run away from something you could affect change to that would make it positive. If socialism comes around, then we're going to have this bizarre, sort of bait and switch algorithm that's going to occur, which is socialism promises everything, right? Why not say anything? And then just do whatever you want afterwards. Remember George Bush Sr., read my lips, no new taxes, and then the dude raised taxes. Wow, didn't you get it? But a Democrat will say, oh, that was a Republican. And you're like, okay, Obama lied every single time he ever talked about his health care program, telling you could keep your doctor and you could keep your plan. You couldn't do either thing. And your premiums went up 4x from the day that it was first offered. Horrific. I've dealt with startups so many times, I've lost count, let's put it that way. But I have been in situations where someone is trying to pitch a product and they haven't really thought it through. And there's an investor who's a good person who's willing to trust the individual who is pitching the product. And this scenario is a very sad scenario for everybody involved. But the person who is like, I just really want to have my own business and be successful, they will literally say to themselves, and sometimes admit it to people like myself, well, we just need to get the guy's money. And then once we get the guy's money, we will have enough time with that money to figure out all the things that we can't answer right now. All right. Well, investors don't give you money on those principles, on those objectives. They're like, no, you get your crap together because I want every dollar I give you to go towards the solution. Now, it might be that you need to build a part and you haven't figured out exactly all the R&D on how to do it and you need to pay for it, but you're an expert at that and I will pay for this variable within the business model. But some people have no business model at all. I've been inside of startups in the last 12 months where a very good friend of mine is trying to raise money for a project. And the weird thing is, I was on a dozen phone calls with very famous think tank people. And I'm totally confused about what the hell we're doing. I'm supposed to be hired as a writer. And everybody kept saying, okay, well, what is this product? Like, what are we doing here exactly? Well, it could be anything. And it was like, whatever you want it to be. It's like, that is not what you say. If the dude can think up his own gig, then he's not going to share it with you unless he can use you to realize it better. And so I see this at the adult level and I see it at the kid level. But the true oxymoron in the country that's really causing this is we have the worst education we've ever had. We have super expensive degrees that are unemployable. And so every kid in America, just so that you know, is getting sort of a lowbrow version of what we used to get when I was a kid, which was the American dream, propaganda. You can be anything that you want to be, which is obviously the truth in any country that doesn't have one of these generals in it. Any free country, hey man, just work really hard and you can get anything to happen. Build up your skills and all that kind of stuff, right? But now the kids graduate high school, graduate college, maybe, and they don't know anything. They don't know how to get anything. And because of the internet, All those little mom and pop stores that people thought they could start, they can't start anymore because this place is being turned into an internet shopping spree, right? It's all Amazon.com. There's an amazing series of videos that I don't know, probably some of you have seen them. It's about abandoned malls. Some of these guys have over 100,000, 200,000 subscribers, and all they do, and I don't mean to minimize what they do, but it's interesting. They go to these old malls. They find them. They go to them. 9 times out of 10, they're completely abandoned. Every once in a while, there'll be a couple functioning stores out of like 50 stores. And they're showing you the ramifications of online shopping. And I thought it would be, because Toys R Us is actually coming back, which as a, I never went there much because my family was broke when I was a kid. And by the time I got old enough, there's nothing in the store I really want. But it makes me happy that kids can go find things that are really educational or creative, right? Legos or whatever it is, right? But they're coming back to the malls. But I thought, how funny would it be, or ironic, or as a demonstration, if you had a good successful retail place, you take like a 20 by 20 room out of your retail space, like say the size of like a super Walmart or something, and you put everything in there behind plexiglass. And it says, and there's just barcodes everywhere. And this is your internet shopping area in the store. But behind the plexiglass is all the fun stuff. The toys and the Legos and the books. And all that stuff's behind glass. And the example is to say, you can't touch any of this stuff. Oh, maybe there's some screenshots that are printed out. But it shows you how unengaging and how uninteresting and how uninformative it is to shop online. And so what's happening? We've all done this. You go to the retailer, you find the product that you like, and then you go online and buy it. Because the retailer is selling it to you for some ridiculous price. I just had to buy a roll of copper foil as part of fixing my laptop. Well, at the local store, it's $25. And someone has already pulled off the first 6 inches and ground it up because I don't know what the hell they're doing. And I try to find all the other ones, try to find a clean one so I can get the local retailer the money. They're all messed up. The guy won't knock down any price on this thing. I'm like, look, at least a foot of this thing is destroyed. You want to pay full price for this? Protect it a little bit better, would you? I found it online for $11. Now, the only reason why I went online was because I have to get a bunch of components the store doesn't carry. Because they can't afford to carry absolutely everything on planet Earth, like really fine copper wire and SMD rectifiers. They don't sell any SMDs at stores. They only sell like the normal diodes with the pins out of them, or I should say the wires. I bought some epoxy at the store, high temperature epoxy. It was like, this stuff melts at probably about 100 degrees. You couldn't glue a handle onto a coffee mug before it would fall off. It was just absolute crap. So, no one in Orange County carries it. I got to go online. We're all guilty of this thing. But this is destroying the retail outlets, which then destroy a ton of people's dreams. And because the second tier of what's going on is sort of the globalism issue, and there definitely has to be adjustments to society, but we make something really cool. If I make an invention here in the United States of America and I patent it, and I get it made by myself or by people in America, and the Chinese see it, well, the Chinese I saw a whole documentary on this. They have a whole division in their government that is assigned to stealing IP. That's what they do. All right, so they knock it off over there, and they ship it in, and they're in complete violation of copyright. You go to the retailer and you try to protest, they're going to say, we have to take it up with them. We don't know that this is illegal. Do you have an injunction that says we can't sell this? Well, not yet. Well, now, what do you think that lawsuit's going to cost you? Let's say your startup is only making maybe $20,000 a month, but your lawsuit over there is going to be $2 million, and they're winning every day over you. So for a little bit of comfort, we're losing our destinies. And these poor kids, and I do say poor kids, even though they're annoying as fuck all, man. They're not being taught the Constitution. They're not being taught all the villains of the world. I haven't been to school in 30 years, but I have to say, I'm willing to bet if I were to reset, going through some, like the movie Toy, and I'm shrunk down to a little kid, and I go through, 7 through senior year, I'm pretty sure I'm never going to get taught, well, one, Tesla and compound interest, but the other thing I'm never going to get taught is about Mao Zedong and Stalin and Pol Pot and all the Mussolinis and Hitlers. Maybe I'll learn Hitler, right? Because there's an agenda behind learning about that guy. But they probably won't tell me. At the same time, they're telling me about these folks that socialism was first, the gun grab was second, and then tyranny and a dictator came third. But what's the irony of the Democratic Party? They keep calling Trump a dictator. They keep saying Trump hangs out with dictators because he's trying to solve problems with these dictators. Xi's a dictator. In China, he is. He said he's going to be president till he dies. Well, that sounds pretty much like a dictator to me. So, what makes him different than Kim Jong-un? What makes him different than Putin? Putin said he'll be president until he dies too, until he hands it over. Okay. What's the difference? Those are individuals that the Democrats will support through various means, meaning they won't support Putin because he's supposedly the bad guy. Obviously, they won't support Kim Jong-un because he's been taken over by the clowns of America, which is a reference to another alphabet agency. But just like Rick Gervais said during the Golden Globes, he goes to Tim Cook, he says, look, you're virtue signaling through your new Apple streaming service, but you're a company that has your phones made by slave labor in China. So, kind of shut the fuck up, man. You're literally exploiting people in a foreign country so that you can make ridiculous profit margins on these phones. Guarantee you, any of the phones you get from Apple, I would imagine that they're $2,500 phone at the absolute maximum, and I'm willing to bet I'm nearly doubling the price of what they're getting it for cost. I would say the core parts inside a $2,500 phone probably run Apple $150. Labor, nothing at all. And who's the big virtue signaling corporation in this planet? Apple. All right. Again, how the board of directors rationalizes this move is ridiculous. Obviously, they're trying to tell the board of directors, hey, this is great. We have a bunch of fanboys for reason A, and so they buy our products over here for reason B. But we've bound them together, right? They feel like if they have an iPhone, they're standing up for the world. It's like, what are you, crazy? It'd be interesting to run a contest to find the biggest Apple fanboys on planet Earth, right? And then to get that guy that does the singing karaoke. He ripped off my friend Robert Llewellyn with his show Carpool, but he does the singing karaoke in the car, right? So it's a carpool karaoke thing. Take that guy and send him over to the sweat factories in China. Send him over to the prison camps in China where people get their organs harvested against their will, and have him watch the whole process. Horrify this guy with what he is so sure is a big feather in his cap with the big God when he dies. Man. There was a documentary made by Vice where this older journalist went to North Korea before Trump was in office. Of course, it was the axis of evil at the time. And he spends quite a bit of time over there, and he sees the fact that all the males are conscripted into military service. So every single one of them knows how to work a gun, knows how to drive whatever vehicles they have, and it's all ancient stuff. It's no threat to the United States, but there's nothing like hand-to-hand combat training. There's nothing like being able to use a gun, a bayonet, a dagger, all that stuff. And they may not, they're not remotely as well-trained as our military in the modern world. But he then comes back over to South Korea. And there's this scene where he looks around and he kind of whispers to the camera, something to the effect of, if not exactly, he goes, man, if they decided to invade South Korea, this place would fall in a day. And his mindset is to say, none of these kids know how to fight. None of these kids know anything about hardship. And just across the DMZ are some of the most hardcore Asian guys on planet Earth, right? This is something that should be recognized about China as well. China has a tremendously huge army, and they haven't fought a war against anyone else for quite a while. We'll take the Nanking massacre and give it special treatment, which was then being taken over by the Japanese. And I have to say, one of the weirdest things about World War II history is that you will go all the way through American school and you will never be taught about the massacres of Nanking. And if I say that word and you're like, boy, I don't know what you're talking about, don't feel bad. But then go up on YouTube and watch a documentary that's at least over 45 minutes. And I will say, you need to be a person with a strong stomach, because it will leave you with visions that, unless you abuse animals, it will leave you with visions that will haunt you for a long time. What happened in Nanking utterly blows away anything that happened in any concentration camp anywhere. And that's no joke. And I know what I'm saying is a big claim. Just go watch it. And the weird thing is they took photographs and they took movies, and, it was, you just don't even know what happened to the Japanese. Something just crawled into their brain. They all became savages. And what's strange about it is that now that we know Japan in the modern world, it really doesn't make any sense, But supposedly there was a general in the Japanese army that was very, very brutal. And they now attribute a lot of this mentality that made Nanking possible to this guy really, sort of training them to think that Chinese people weren't even human, is one of the theories, I should say, and that you could do anything you wanted with them, but it was just was unbelievable. So a lot of the darkness from our past isn't taught to Americans in general, and so of course we also have although it's completely different, and probably since this QAnon guy started posting in late 2017. We have an awakening that is measurable, that is unbelievable. And so now we've got, again, tons of YouTube channels that are trying to keep it real. And that's super healthy for us, because now we're starting to learn about the propaganda that we have heard. This whole thing of hating Russia just really pisses me off. And I did an episode called Fake Enemies, and they demonetized it because in that episode I said, look, and I had a good friend of mine who's very smart, and I said, she was complaining about the fact that, Trump talks to Putin, and it was this whole hate Russia thing. And I'm sitting there going, look, why do you still buy into that 1980s and beyond propaganda about Russia? It's not the 1950s anymore. Khrushchev is not the president anymore. They're on the other side of the world. We don't mess with them. They don't mess with us. And that's the truth. But now they're being blown up again. Like this Cold War thing was literally restarted the second that Trump got in office. And now they're blaming, again, the Russians for throwing the election. I mean, what a crock of crap. Again, let's just say, I've said this in a recent episode, but just think about it. You're here and you're a Democrat. You're here and you're a Republican. What ad on Facebook's going to change your mind? And people like to run that theory, well, here's the undecided on the fence. It's like, they're going to listen to Donald Trump talk. They're going to listen to Pelosi talk and AOC talk and Schiff talk, and they're going to make their decision about what party they want to be involved in. They're going to watch Elizabeth Warren collect millions of dollars in Harvard educational professor fees, claiming she was part Cherokee. As I've been told by my Native American friends, you can't test for Cherokee blood because it matches other Native American factions, but she comes up 1,024th, which is nothing. So she lied. And then she doubled down on the lie, making some infomercial about how she had her blood checked. And the blood that she came up positive for at 1,024th, which is nothing, is some Peruvian thing way down south, which is obviously an irregularity in the blood that happened to match someone else. She's as white as a ghost. But no one's going to change your mind if you're stuck on those issues. The candidates themselves will change your minds, and that's the only way it works. I haven't heard anyone say that Russia hacked into George Soros's voting machines. I haven't heard that. I haven't heard any decent claim at all about how it works, but I hear it on both sides of the fence. On TV, well, we know that Russia did this. It's like, no, you don't know, and you're full of shit, and you're just pandering to the agenda. So, just from one American to everybody else in the world, we do have our utterly delusional, coddled people who are, a lot of them are being supported by their parents having never had a job. You know, everybody goes through hardships, and you need your parents every once in a while to kick in if you still got them and they can still help you. That happens, and that's a whole different scenario. You're trying, right? You were on top and then you're on bottom, whatever. But some of these kids, and it's honestly, it's not their fault that they're uninformed, that they're undereducated, they have a massive debt. You know, the impeachment trial, I think, has cost us, well, when they added up all the fake dossier paying and all this other stuff, trying to frame Trump for something that he never did, plus the Mueller investigation, I think we're up to $150 million of taxpayer money being spent on these bullshit Democratic led agendas. And then you take all of their salaries, which start at $147, I think, and go all the way up. I mean, I don't even know what the highest person is paid. They're not doing anything for the country at all, right? They're not voting for anything. I mean, you know, they recently put forth a vote for this trade agreement we have with Canada and Mexico because they absolutely have to. But when you add it up, you're probably, I would assume, $300 million or so wasted with this party. That's 3,000 college degrees that could have been paid for in full. 3,000. That could have at least given these kids a chance to say, okay, we're going to wipe away all your debt. In fact, we're going to even wipe off the interest before we wipe away your debt. Therefore, you don't have a $100,000 loan. You actually got a $60,000 loan. And so we're going to pay for 4,000 degrees. But what is the promise from the same party? Oh, we're going to pay for all this stuff. Free medical coverage, free education, free, which is, you know, immediately in the trillions of dollars once you start adding it up. Even if we got price breaks, you're probably at a few trillion. Money we don't have. But the country is sort of like the conservatives, which is really, at this point, it takes nothing to be a conservative. If you were a normal Democrat in America right now, you would be considered a conservative from these radical AOC nutbags, right? But you just say the Constitution is directly in the middle between right and left because it doesn't have any bias. It is, you have these inalienable rights because this country was founded on a republic, meaning if the whole country voted against the freedom of speech, you still have it because this is the way the Constitution works. You get these rights because you're alive. Well, we tolerated crazy to see if it would blow over. Some of it blew over, you know, like Black Lives Matter seemed to calm down a little bit. Again, with Candace Owens, with the Black Sit project and the walkaway, #walkaway, it has had a significant impact on this craziness here. But we still have, you know, all of our climate change horse shit, you know, Greta, oh my God, you know. The fact that these folks fall hook, line, and sinker for this chick, it just blows my mind, right? But now we're starting to fight back. The president has started to fight back. The intelligence agencies and the heads of the DOJ are starting to fight back. So we have an attorney general fighting back. We have Durham fighting back and reporting to the AG. So we have, I think that's correct, we have quite a few voices on the internet that didn't exist 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, there's guys out there. I've had this show for 5 years. I am so fucking totally ganked by their censorship. It is unbelievable. I just posted on the Facebook group in case you guys don't have a subscription to that. I will get 10 subscriptions in a day, and the next morning 9 of them are gone, if not all 10 of them are gone. Today I was like refreshing my feed, and it was like 5 people gone. And I was like, holy shit, you know. But the stats on the statistics, I'm blowing up. Like, in terms of the amount of video watched. This channel has been watched 45 years, right? So you add up all the minutes on just YouTube, 45 years. I've at least got, I don't know, conservative estimate, probably half of that in podcast that you could add to those 45 years. And so the show is getting watched like crazy. The average watch time used to be low 20s, and now it's the high 30s, meaning the average video gets watched 38 minutes now before someone pauses to go do something else and then come back and watch the second half. But we're fighting back now. And so the other thing I want to communicate, because I was just hearing about, just hearing the reactions and reading tons of reactions online about this whole Iranian situation, because everyone gets all, worried about World War III, and it's just not going to happen. They don't want it. The reason why Iran will never do it is because it will force a regime change. One, we would win that war, and we win it mostly from the air. And it would probably result in simply us nailing their regime, which is illegal, I think, but it would happen in World War III. I mean, because we need to end that shit as soon as possible, right? And I don't think Russia would want any of that craziness to happen, so they'd probably lobby in there and go, you just need to defuse this thing, which is probably what actually ended up taking place. But, there's a bunch of... I even had one of my listeners post. He listed a whole list of things the previous leaders to Trump have done to create this horrible situation that America's in. And then he blamed Trump for them. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you, man? I mean, so I get to go to your family tree, and every fucking scumbag in your family tree, I get to say, there's probably only just a few of them, right? But I blame everyone up your family tree for every bad apple that ever ended up. If you blame me for what my cousin did in life, you would never talk to me again. Ever. You guy's such a scumbag. Well, no one does that. So don't do it to Trump. Fuck's sake, man. But I gave an analogy, and I want every American to give this analogy. And if you see what I'm saying and you're not from America, then God bless you. You can repeat this too. Since, the 16th Amendment in America, which was passed in 1913, and for those of you who are familiar with our Constitution, I totally get it. This is where they took over our money and made it fiat, 1913. We don't make our own money anymore, but it's all fake, right? It's stupid. It's fake. We should make our own fake money. The Federal Reserve that we have over here is a private for-profit bank. As soon as that happened, Skull and Bones moved in. I mean, Taft, the president before Woodrow Wilson, who got it falsely ratified, he was a Skull and Bones. He's the first Skull and Bones president. They created the Clowns of America. And so that was all Skull and Bones for 40 years. You couldn't be at the top of that organization unless you're part of Skull and Bones. Now we've had so many Skull and Bones presidents, ridiculous. What they did was the following. And I always give this analogy. Think of Thor's hammer. Chris Hemsworth's prop from the movie. There's a big lump of steel on one end, and there's that leather handle that goes back, right? It's all steel, but it's, got leather grip on it. Here's how America has rolled since 1913, which means World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, Desert Storm, and all this bullshit's been going on since 2003. All of it. The bankers, because of the complicit presidents that ran after that, picked out since 1954 by the Bilderberg Group, but don't think that, Roosevelt was a complete fucking shill. The guy got rid of everybody's gold and sent it over to the Europeans through this bullshit Fort Knox, which is named after Philander Knox and not this Navy admiral they give you this bullshit story of. But they grabbed the handle. The European bankers grabbed the handle, and they look at things in the world that need to be destroyed so they can take over. South America, Africa, and Eurasia, the Middle East. And they take that handle and they smash the big metal part on the end of the handle, which is America, the flag, all the bodies of all of our men and women is that hammer on the end, and they smash the world with it. Bam, boom, bam. So, when people look up at what hit them, what's up there? An American bomber, an American fighter. What's shooting at them through the door? An American soldier. All these folks are trying to do the right thing as soldiers trying to protect our country. But the bankers instigate, just like investors, right? Investors create investments. They don't wait around for people to come to them and say, hey, I had an idea. It's not Shark Tank in the real world. They make things happen. They invent medicines to make you sick, and then they buy the hospitals to treat you. They teach a woman that she has to be lying down on her back to have a kid, otherwise she might die, but that causes breech. And so now everyone has to have cesarean, when the natural way to have a child is to squat. Best if you squat in a pool of water. They invent things. So we have been the butt of this whole thing the entire time. Now, if we had another Bohemian Grove going, the Bilderberg selected CFR, Trilateral Commission president, like Obama, like Bush, like Clinton, like his Bush Sr., Reagan was duped, I think. I think he's an actor. I think he tried to do the right thing, but they shot him to prove, dude, you're not in control. So shut the fuck up and we'll run the show. Your vice president, he's the one in charge. He's a Bush, man. Guy ran the CIA randomly out of thin air in 1974 for 11 months and puked on the Chinese president or whatever it was. So just understand that we are trying to, Trump is really, really, really trying to get the handle out of the bankers from now on. You think him pulling the troops out of Syria was easy? It's easy to give the command, but all the shills inside the government, I'm talking the military-industrial complex, we think might have had a silent coup, and you just didn't hear about it. Meaning they got rid of all their little shills inside. Now, Trump is trying to drain the swamp. What did you think was going to happen? Did you think it was all going to be some cake and eat it too moment? Some peaceful accord? Well, Pelosi, it's time for you to leave and put these handcuffs on because you're going to take a trip to Cuba. Not the cigar Cuba, but the Guantanamo Bay Cuba. No, it's not the way it works. They're fighting back, and they've got nothing. Absolutely nothing. So they're trying to keep nothing going forever. Remember, the Russian collusion was the nothing burger? Well, that's exactly what it turned out to be. A nothing burger. All that dossier shit, all faked by a guy who's a fucking washed-up alcoholic MI6 dude. So we're in a really tumultuous stage in this country, but the good news is we are now doubling down on our Constitution like never before. The value of the Constitution has never been so apparent to so many citizens of the United States, probably since, I don't know where we actually lost grip with our Constitution. We didn't care about it anymore. It may be because of great decades like perhaps the 80s, I don't know. Maybe the distraction of the 90s, when you had the internet explosion. Maybe the 2000s, where it's kind of like, oh, we need to have the Fourth Amendment permanently violated. I don't know what we do about the Fourth Amendment in this country. How can if I sat down with Donald Trump right now, the biggest question I want to ask the guy is, what are you going to do to restore the Fourth Amendment? Eavesdropping. I know you're listening to all my phone calls. I know you're grabbing all my text messages and all my emails. I know you want that information because it allows, the second you stop looking at all that stuff, well then in your brain everyone's colluding against you. So this is basically the modern stamp tax. I get to look at every piece of paper in your house because if you're going to cabal against the queen or the king, that's what you're going to do. You're going to write down your plan and then we'll find it because we have to put a little stamp on every piece of paper. That's a real thing back in history. Go look it up, the stamp tax. It will blow your mind that the citizens of England allowed there to be a stamp tax. I think man is actually a fairly terrified creature. I think we're scared constantly because there's always some bully. I think that it's interesting. We want to protect ourselves and our loved ones from bad experiences. But you ask any kid that had to grow up in fistfights, and you have someone a lot bigger than you coming at you, and you're not sure what's going to happen, and even though you're young and you have this I'll live forever sort of thing, you get punched by someone who's got a fist as big as your head, you will rethink your life a little bit. And once you get, dominated, it'll change your mind a little bit about like, okay, it's like LL Cool J. He got really buff because there was a attempted murder on his mother and his grandfather at his house. And so he was 12 or something. You read his book, you'll find all about this stuff. But he got really buff because he was like, I am never going to be caught unsafe again, unable to defend myself, right? Well, there was a point, you'll see old movies where, in fact, I was looking at the Maltese Falcon movie, right? And if you haven't seen that movie, it's about a Maltese Falcon statuette thing. It's a little black falcon. It's about the size of a vase with flowers in it. And it was, for whatever reason, a guy chased it for 17 years, I think is the number. Humphrey Bogart plays a detective who's got a woman that comes in and gives him a line of crap about something, and he kind of senses that she's full of crap. But there's all this back and forth between Humphrey Bogart and the local police because they know he's up to something. They think he's maybe up to some shady stuff. People end up dying in the movie, and they come to him and they try to muscle him a little bit, but he muscles back the cops. And the interesting thing is that in that era of the 30s, I think it was in the 30s, cops were good overall, right? At least they're portrayed on TV as being, like a law-abiding police officers. And today, you could never push a script like that because, you lip off to a cop and there's no one looking. He doesn't have a little cam on his chest. Well, just do whatever the hell he wants because he's making his own judgments as to whether or not you're being a dick, And so sometimes we might even support that kind of behavior because you have to fight fire with fire sometimes. But all that's gone. All that's gone. Nobody trusts anybody. And so, it's it's funny because I have friends running for the Senate. And one of the interesting things about that process is that they're going to try and corner my friend on issues to try and get them to piss off enough people that they won't win. That's going to be the game. And we've talked about this a little bit in other episodes, but think about it. If the subject of, say, abortion gets brought up, because that's always the thing, and of course, if you're remotely conservative, you're a pro-lifer, but there's always conditions to pro-life, they're not insane. There are reasons why they might support it in a really contingency situation, but, people killing a 9-month-old kid after it's born in Virginia is just insane, right? But what they'll try to do is get you on that edge. And one of the tactics back is simply to say, look, pick any church in America. Any church in America. I give this analogy every once in a while, but this is really important, okay? Because this will really show you the frailty of the human mind. Go to the front pew of any church where you have your really enthusiastic goers, right? Because they're sitting right in the front row. There's no one sitting in front of them. And, pick a subject. Pick a subject in the Bible and go, how do you interpret this? Letter to Corinthians, where Paul says that women should sit down and shut the fuck up and talk to their husbands before they're allowed to talk to the church. Okay, most of us think that that passage was inserted. Even if it was inserted, we think it was because women's education was so subdued that perhaps, it might be best if they did go through their educated husband. It's a timely thing at best. Doesn't apply to today. Well, if you're a woman, especially if you go to a Mormon church, women can actually preach. There's a few, divisions that allow that to happen. And you go, well, what do you think about that? Is it wrong? Is it wrong that you're not supposed to be up there? And it says right there in the New Testament, you're not supposed to be up there? And you'll start dividing just one person down the other. You'll ask him too, was Genesis 100% literal? Did all those things happen? Because it retells the first story a couple times, and man is first, then animals are first, then man. Okay, which one's right? And they'll start disagreeing down the pew. Okay, but then you go, look, can you still come here next Sunday and worship God together and feel good and sing a hymn and all that good stuff? Oh yeah, sure, yeah, sure. It's like, okay, then you know how the world works now. We're not all on the same page. As much as we'd love to be on the same page. Let's say that all these crazy Democrats are going, they all get pushed out of office, and the only ones that are left are your normal Democrats that just have a little bit of a liberal thinking process, power to them. It's good to see both sides of all fences, right? The true racist ones are gone. The normal ones are left. Like our relatives are usually not radicals. They're just, Just a little bit left. That's all. Okay. Can we coexist? Can we be together in one country? Can we be together at the dinner table? Can we celebrate Christmas and Thanksgiving and all these other places, all these other holidays? Of course we can. But, just getting towards the end of this episode, one of the things that is most frustrating as a citizen of America, and I have no claim over any other country, and I say it all the time, which is that it happens on both sides of the fence. But what's interesting is that what I see from my perspective, living in Southern California and smoking in a lounge which has tons of guys coming in and out. And again, we're mostly conservative here, but we're not crazy. We're not Koch brothers enthusiasts. We're not Carlyle group enthusiasts. We're not, Halliburton lovers. They tend to just stand on the Constitution. That's what we do. And so that gets everyone generally on the conservative side on the same page really quick. Well, they'll just say, most people start to, probably the last 3 years that I know, if you say, well, what party you're part of? And they go, yeah, well, I'm not really part of any party. And then I'll say to them, well, me neither. I'm just really a constitutionalist. They go, yeah, exactly that. That's what I am, constitutionalist. You're not left or right anymore. You're standing dead center. It's awesome. Do no harm. It's really the basic law of the world. But what happens with my left friends that are more of the concerning left is that they're standing on top of CNN headlines. They'll believe in climate change. And I say, well, what's the percentage of CO2 in the greenhouse gas index? They have no idea. Not a clue. And when you tell them, I just recently told a friend of mine who I love her to death, and she just looked at me and shook her head. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me and shook her head. I was like, well, you can't deny what's true. I got my information from the head meteorologist at MIT. Okay, is this guy wrong? He's got a PhD in this. He's been teaching it for over 30 years. Is he wrong? No, he's not wrong, because he's backed up by everybody else that says this is bullshit. Man-made climate change? Oh yeah. It's called chemtrails. It's called geoengineering. It's called stratospheric aerosols, right? You want to know why forests just burn up in the middle of nowhere? Well, human beings are lighting the match, of course. And let's not forget that Australia, Kim.com, who's turned into a complete commie. I don't know what the hell's wrong with this dude. He posted the fake picture of Australia burning, which is the whole island burning with mountain ranges and volcanoes in this picture that do not exist in real life. The reality was, it's a significant portion, but it's down by Queensland. It's this little strip down there. Well, we got 3 of you that are in Australia who are some of our greatest contributors. Our listeners came back and said, yeah, I called around and everyone's asking me why they're worried about me when fires. I'm like, the fires are by you, man. They're not even in my area. I don't know if it was a listener or a friend of mine. Someone just recently told me that they called their friends in New Zealand and said, can you see the fire smoke coming over New Zealand? They were like, no, are you okay? We heard the whole place is on fire. Well, just as a little digression, so you can put this in your little quiver of facts. Aluminum oxide sprayed inside chemtrails. Again, confirmed by Dr. Russell Blaylock, retired neurologist, and Dane and all these other guys that study it. Dane is the one that broke this story, as a matter of fact. I keep forgetting his last name. Just look up Dane Chemtrails. You'll find his website. The dude he's a scientist who owns 2,600 acres up to Shasta Mount Shasta. He proved that the acidity of all the plants on his 2,600 acres is going from like negative 6.3 to 6.7 to 0. Once that happens, you got a huge problem. All the plants start dying from within, systemically. Again, plants drink from the roots up. And so when you screw up the soil, you screw up what they're drinking, and they start dying from the inside out. We'll light it on fire, see what happens. If any of you have ever burned a tumbleweed, and for those of you who haven't, let me tell you all about them. They're this crazy bush, and they naturally die and harden into this kind of weird driftwood. But they're a bush. It's really strange. They get hard as a rock. If you were to take one of the tumbleweeds and break one of their branches off and look down inside of them, it's hollow inside. And so when you light them on fire, it's an amazing thing. You know, I told this story once before. When I first came to California, we used to always go to the beach and do bonfires and stuff. But we'd bring wood, or we'd find real wood. But we heard this party going on once, probably 1/10 of a mile down the beach. And they're all yelling and screaming, but it's totally black down there. And we're like, what the hell? And we got our fire started, normal campfire. And we heard from this guy who was like, can we have some of your fire? And we're like, yeah, great. Yeah, come on over. We're all like teenagers. And this guy comes with a 10-foot radius. I'm not even kidding, man. Tumbleweed. He had it on his head. Absolutely gigantic. And he just tipped his head down. This thing's 10 feet. So it starts to burn on fire. And then he's hopping down the beach. And it was the funniest thing seeing this ball of fire hop down the beach. And then just before it burns him, he throws it onto this pile. And they had made, 15, 20-foot pile of a bunch of tumbleweeds. And they had this roaring flame up into the air, 50, 100 feet. Just blazing hot tornado. And then nothing because it had all burned up. So if you're looking up, and you see tons of chemtrails over your area, and then you have a forest fire, well, guess what? One causes the other. Is it man-made? Yes, it's man-made. If they spray over your area and get rid of the clouds, then whatever happens as a result of that spraying is man-made. They can also spray and create clouds. They can also spray and augment hurricanes. I think Dr. Judy Woods has talked about this, but a lot of people have talked about this. And so they are rushing to create fake statistics or real statistics with fake mechanisms, artificial mechanisms, so they can get this carbon taxation thing in before anyone like Trump and the U.S. military, who's now not against the Constitution, to get them to pass all this stuff. I'm getting right now in my house, carbon taxation, email credits. I've done such a good job. Oh, you're so good with your, carbon credits. I want to just tell these guys to go fuck themselves. But, if I sent the email back, one, it doesn't go anywhere. But if I made a phone call, I'm talking to some poor person on the other side of the phone that has no idea about Agenda 21 or the fact that this stuff's all fake. But people always love a crisis. They do. They want to, there's this weird thing that's very gullible. I know we're a little off track, but it's just all important stuff. You've seen this in your lifetime, and maybe you've even done this in your lifetime but one, you have to, because you have to inform people about bad news sometimes. But let's just take away the ones that are personal, right? Someone in your family's passed away, and you've got to pass the information around. It's some outside thing. And you go, well, have you heard of this? You're walking in a room, and maybe you get attention or maybe you don't get attention. But the second you've got really bad news to talk about, and you're the most informed bad news person in the room, what happens? You become the center of attention, don't you? Well, what happened next? What happened? What about this fact, this fact, this fact? That's why when I make these shows, I don't want to, milk agendas. Everybody rushed online to say, Q's posting again. I could have done that. And everyone says, I probably have like a ton of money in the bank and a ton of subscribers. I got to meet my God one day, and I'm not going to do it that way, right? So if you guys make a lot of requests for something, I'll do it to serve my audience because you're interested. Maybe you don't have time to research things, so I'll go grab that information. But I cringe every single time I make an episode that I believe looks like clickbait. It just bothers me. I want it to stand up on its own, level of information integrity, if you will. So I think climate change has a lot of that action, go in and report a bunch of horrible stuff. But I have heard friends of mine say things that aren't even true, right? They will say things that are like, well, have you heard of this crisis? And it's some absolute bunch of bullshit. And they're God, I can't even say one because I'll offend one of my friends. But there are things that are being propagated as like this super urgent thing. And I give you the archetype of the conversation, which was thing gets reported as the most critical thing in the entire world that no one's paying attention to. And then we said, because I'm sitting in a room with a person that worked on the solution and has experienced the solution several times, we said, well, that's not really a problem because the man has invented machines to fix that problem. And the other person said, no. Those machines have never been invented. They've never been turned on anywhere in the world. And it's like, I don't want to disagree with you because I love you. But yeah, they have. And it's been around for probably 30 years. But in the last 20 years, it's so good, it's not even an issue anymore. You know, we don't have them in our country because we don't have this problem you're talking about. I don't know. It's just like, so it's interesting. You're going to have to bite your lip a little bit. Anyway, I definitely hope this conversation will help provide some sort of one guy's perspective of his country from the outside. Again, if you can chime in from your country and tell me what you're experiencing and what you're seeing, the evolution, especially if you're around 50 years old, there's a great area of compatibility. We had another comment today, and I don't have my phone on me, so I don't know everybody's name, but another gentleman came to our channel, and he said a great comment for me personally. He said, I think it was on intellectual hatred. He said, you know, I have lived a very similar life to you, but I lived it in the reverse. I was in California as a young person up to about 25, and now I believe he's in Missouri. So I moved from Kansas to California. You know, I'm 17, but, you know, it's the same kind of spread. And so he was saying that he was seeing what I was talking about in Missouri, and which was in this episode. You have to watch it if you're interested in that kind of subject matter. But it's so powerful for me to hear either a myth dismissed or a rumor confirmed from your local area. So the more you're away from the United States, you know, one, I'm interested really in two things. One of them is your perspective of the United States, and perhaps maybe there's two sets of all the data. It's your perspective, and then it's your neighborhood's perspective. You know, it's like, I don't think, you know, maybe I'm playing someone from Europe, let's just say. They might say, I know you guys aren't crazy, but our country thinks you're crazy. So those two different perspectives are real important. And then it's like, whatever subject we're talking about, your perspective of your own country, and then your country's perspective of your country. And where you might have some anomalies or stuff. Because again, you know, the bummer is I don't have the cash to fly around the planet and really learn these things firsthand so that I can do shows and say, oh my God, I can have one of you sitting right next to me and get, you know, do an interview with you guys. Yes, there's Zoom and those kind of things, but there's a whole different game when I get to live in your area for a month or something. I get to see things, and you tour me around and go, see that right there? See, don't say you're from America. This place, they love you over here. That stuff has a lot of value. So if you can load up the comments, I'm totally interested. And again, we've not had too many folks join the Facebook page in recent months. So I would definitely say that we've got a really good group up there. And the way you get to that, as we close out this episode, is to go to deepthoughtsradio.com. Again, this is the hub of the show, is the website. So you have a search field to look up anything that's on your mind. Just put a word and you'll be amazed. Sometimes there's episodes out there because it also searches the description and the keywords. So you might find something that you're looking for. But there's a category list of all the episodes knocked into categories. I have a new category list which is demonetized on YouTube, so you can get a chance to see what they won't allow. Sometimes it's just the name of the episode I use. If I use war, they just, you know, it's all fucking bullshit. Because if you really think about it, I watch everything on TV through, like, for instance, you can watch shows now with ads, right? I mean, all of you know that, right? You can go to Amazon Prime and you can watch a bunch of shows that you normally have to rent, but you just agree to watch them with ads. Well, I mean, goddamn, they're like murder shows and, you know, like even Fringe, which is a great fun sci-fi show, which I'm going to do an episode on. It's got, you know, all kinds of crazy rotted bodies and just amazing stuff. It's actually a really funny, amazing show that everyone needs to watch. But so they monetize, the world monetizes everything. Those same advertisers are on YouTube. Like, give me a break, right? Anyway, so we have two video feeds right now, which is YouTube and BitChute. Make sure you get a BitChute account. It's more important you get a BitChute account than you subscribe to this channel, BitChute, just to support them. We are coming on to Brighteon, but again, it's going to take hundreds of views before I get my next 50 videos, and whatever, they don't help. We have all the podcasting links you'd ever need. We have, again, 3 social media, so we've got a locked Facebook group. Get in, have some fun. We have Twitter, which is starting to pick up some steam. I do comment every once in a while. And then we have Minds.com, which is the new First Amendment free speech zone It's better looking than Facebook. Definitely would recommend just getting an account. They've got a really beautiful app on your phone. I mean, it's really sexy. So, it takes care of business. We have a few ways to donate to the page. So we've got the one-time PayPal methodology, and we have Patreon. What Patreon gets you is the episodes before everybody else in most cases. It's right now we're operating about 95%, but on a bad month, it might be 85% if I'm trying to rush episodes out real quick. I will say that, for everybody who subscribes to Patreon, which I thank you very much, most people don't click over early or anything. They just wait for things to come out naturally. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So I appreciate all of your contributions. The other thing under the donate link, which doesn't create any revenue whatsoever, is the Brave browser and the Backblaze backup software. So definitely switch to Brave. Switch your search engine to Google, from Google to DuckDuckGo, and then you'll be completely free of anyone tracking your matrix about where you are on the internet. It's just guilt-free, and it's way faster than Chrome. And Chrome was way faster than Firefox. It's fast because it cuts all of these trackers out of your life. All these autoplay videos, it just kills them. It's beautiful. You won't find any Season 1 on this channel because it's all been remastered. So there's a brand new channel out there. It's got no advertising, so you get the whole first season with no advertising. It's all been edited. All the audio levels have been fixed. In some cases, I cut damn near 10 minutes out of an episode because I was sitting here thinking and I just kept the camera rolling without editing it. So that's much, much better. There's a store up there with 2 new shirts for Season 5. They're UFO-based shirts. One shirt comes in just one t-shirt configuration. The other shirt says, I like UFOs, and it's got the UFO from the backyard in there. That one is in all kinds of different formats. So you can get a hoodie, you can get a t-shirt and stuff. So I'm going to turn them off at the end of the season, and so you won't be able to get them. I am going to be trying to generate some new ones that are just going to be up there at all times. That are probably a lot different than just a Deep Thought shirt, because I just want to create shirts that are cool, that I'd like to wear, and something that when you put on, someone's going to ask you, what is that? So the 2 new shirts have the UFO at like a diagram schematic angle. One of them has the branding on the back. One of them has nothing on the back. But in all cases, someone's going to ask you what the hell that shirt's all about, and you get a chance to introduce them to Deep Thoughts. And then, hey, regardless if they subscribe to the show at all, you get a chance to start talking about the cool things out there. When someone says, well, what the hell is Deep Thoughts Radio? You can just go, well, it's a show where it encourages you to think about what you believe about all things, And it's like, well, what subjects does he cover? And then you just start going off. So it's what I do personally when I sit down and have a cigar with someone. I mean, it's interesting. Like, one of the scenarios that's hilarious, and I hope you guys experience this too, is I'll sit down at my smoke lounge, and there's new guys come in all the time. They just smoke one stick. They're in town for 1 week. They're gone. They're on vacation. They're getting away from the family, or they're on business for a week or whatever. And someone will be, calling them to leave. They're supposed to go upstairs and talk to some other dudes. And as soon as I start talking to them, I just find the niches. They're all old episodes. These guys are riveted for an hour or two, making excuses why they're not coming home. It's hilarious. So that can be you too. And I know you guys have some great things to share. So anyway, on that note, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.